Welcome to Pillowtime Lore. This is your soft corner of the night, a place where stories live like warm embers, glowing in the dark. Before we begin, take a moment to slow down. Let your body melt into whatever holds you, your bed, your chair, or that cozy blanket wrapped around your shoulders. Feel how the day begins to drift away, piece by piece, as if it never belonged to you in the first place. Outside your window, the night is calm. The world has quieted down, and the sky has dressed itself in stars. Imagine gentle snowflakes floating in the distance, each one falling without hurry, without noise, just a silent rhythm to remind you that everything is allowed to slow. And here, in this moment, so are you. The glow of a fireplace flickers softly nearby, its warmth wrapping around you like an embrace. The golden light catches on shelves of books, on soft pillows, on every little detail that makes a room feel like home. You breathe in, and the air feels gentle, safe, peaceful. You breathe out, and the weight of today slips further and further away. There is nothing you need to do right now. No expectation, no demand, only rest, only stillness, only the quiet anticipation of a story that will soon take you by the hand and guide you through places that exist just beyond the edge of dreams. So, let the rhythm of your breath carry you deeper into calm. With every inhale, feel your body fill with ease. With every exhale, imagine the clutter of the day dissolving like mist. You are free now, free to wander through the world of tales where time is slower, and every word is a lantern leading you further into comfort. This is Pillowtime Lore, and tonight, a story awaits you. The night bazaar of the ancient city was alive with 1,000 colors and sounds, the air heavy with the scent of roasted spices, sweet honey, and burning incense. Lanterns swayed above the crowded stalls, their golden light flickering against the dark sky. Merchants shouted of marvels beyond belief, bottles that could trap storms, cages with birds that sang in forgotten languages, jars that whispered secrets when opened. Yet the strangest of them all were the stalls where dreams were sold. Tiny glass vials, glowing faintly as though holding captive a piece of another world. Laila, a young scribe with ink-stained fingers and a restless mind, walked through the chaos. With a skeptical smile tugging at her lips, she had grown up listening to tales of dream sellers. Yet in her heart, she believed such wonders to be nothing but clever tricks to fool the desperate. Still, curiosity was stronger than disbelief, and her feet carried her deeper into the bazaar, her eyes catching on the vials of shifting light, her mind whispering questions she refused to admit aloud. Then she saw him, hidden at the far end of the lane, a stall, unmarked, with no bright banners or shouting words, only silence and shadow. The man who sat there wore a cloak so dark it seemed woven from midnight itself, his face lined like an old parchment, his hands resting still as stone. But it was his eyes that froze Laila where she stood. They were not the eyes of a common merchant. They seemed older than the city itself, carrying a strange weight, as if they had seen every dream that ever was, and every dream yet to be. A shiver ran down her spine, though the night was warm, and for the first time she wondered if perhaps the dreams were real after all. The merchant's voice was low, like a whisper carried by the wind. He told Laila he did not care for gold or silver, that coins could not buy what he offered. Instead, he asked her for something far rarer, her most cherished memory. Laila frowned at his words, for memories were all she had of the people she loved. Yet his gaze was steady, deep as a well, and it stirred something in her heart, a dangerous curiosity she could not silence. He asked her to close her eyes, to search within herself for the memory she held closest. Her mind went unbidden to the nights of her childhood, when her mother's soft voice sang lullabies that wrapped her in warmth, a song that still echoed faintly in her mind whenever she was lonely. The thought of losing it felt like tearing away a piece of her soul. Yet she longed to know the truth of his promise, to see if dreams could truly be caught and given. So with a trembling breath she whispered her choice, the lullaby, and the merchant nodded slowly, as though he had expected it all along. He took her hand, and in that instant a strange warmth spread through her body, a fleeting sweetness like honey dissolving on the tongue. Then an emptiness where the song had once lived. She gasped, realizing she could no longer recall the melody. It had vanished, as though it had never been. The merchant slid a small vial into her palm, its glow soft and pulsing like a living heart. He told her to place it beneath her pillow, that the dream would come to her before dawn. That night, Laila drifted into sleep and found herself standing in a grand hall filled with scholars and kings. Her voice carried wisdom that silenced crowds, her words etched into scrolls. She was revered, honored, loved by all, and yet when she awoke, her chest ached. For though the dream was glorious, the silence where her mother's lullaby once lived was more terrifying than anything she had ever known. The next morning, Laila walked through the crowded streets of the city, with her mind heavy and her heart unsteady. The dream clung to her like a second skin, every detail sharp, the marble pillars of the great hall, the jeweled crowns of the kings, who leaned close to hear her words, the echo of her own voice carrying authority she had never known in her waking life. It was not like a story remembered, it was like a life she had lived and lost in the span of a single night. She tried to hum the lullaby her mother once sang, hoping to comfort herself, but no sound came, only silence where the melody used to rise. And that silence frightened her more than she cared to admit. When evening returned, her restless feet carried her back to the night bazaar, back to the stall cloaked in shadow, where the dream merchant sat waiting as though he had always known. She would return. She demanded to know what trick he had played on her, why the dream felt so real, why her memory was truly gone. The merchant's eyes glimmered in the lantern light as he spoke, telling her that dreams are not illusions, they are doorways, glimpses of the countless lives a person might have lived had they made a different choice, turned a different corner. spoken a different word. He said every human being is not one self, but many selves, scattered across unseen threads of time. And his vials were the keys to those hidden paths. Layla's heart pounded as she listened, for part of her still doubted. Yet another part whispered that perhaps her ordinary life as a scribe was only one small thread in a vast tapestry, and the thought both terrified her and pulled her deeper with an irresistible force. For days, the dream refused to leave Layla. Mind, its weight, pressed on her every time she dipped her quill into ink or copied a line of text for her work. The hall of scholars and kings still shimmered behind her eyes, and though she told herself it was only a dream, she felt as though she had lived another life and returned to this one. The contrast left her restless. Her scribe's bench felt smaller than ever, her words dull compared to the wisdom she had spoken in that other self. One evening, while crossing the marketplace, she heard a traveler arguing with a spice merchant, and in the middle of his words, he quoted a line she remembered speaking in her dream, the very same phrase that had silenced kings and bent crowds to listen. The words struck her like a blade of light. She froze, her heart racing, for how could another know what she had only spoken in sleep? She wanted to believe it was coincidence, but the certainty in the traveler's voice told her otherwise. That night, she sat awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows stretched across the walls, her chest heavy with fear and longing. Part of her wanted to run from the bazaar and never return, to hold tightly to what memories she still had left. But another part, deeper and stronger, whispered that she needed to go back, to trade again, to see more of what could have been. When dawn broke, she admitted the truth to herself. The dream was not fading, it was bleeding into her waking world. And now her hunger to see beyond her single thread was stronger than her fear of what it might cost. The next time Layla stood before the dream merchant, his stall seemed darker than before. The vials of glowing light pulsed faintly like captive stars. She asked him what it would take to see another life, her voice steady but her hands trembling at her sides. The merchant leaned forward and told her that each dream required a fairer price than the last. He would not take coins or jewels. He would take what could never be bought back. He asked for the taste of her favorite childhood food, the honey cakes her grandmother once baked on cold evenings, their sweetness rich with warmth and love. Layla hesitated, for she could still taste them when she closed her eyes. Yet her hunger to know other lives was stronger. She agreed, and with a gesture, he pulled the memory from her, leaving her mouth empty of that sweetness forever. The next dream came with another demand, the sound of her father's laughter, a sound that had always carried her through lonely nights when the merchant took it. Silence filled her instead. She tried to recall his voice, but only emptiness echoed back. Still, she returned for more, as though she could not stop. Finally, he asked for the name of her very first friend, the one who once shared her games and secrets in the narrow streets of the city. She gave it up, though her throat ached as she spoke, and in exchange the merchant's vial glowed brighter than the last. Her dreams grew deeper and more intoxicating, filled with palaces, power, and endless knowledge. Yet, when she awoke, her waking world felt emptier, colors duller, sounds quieter. She began to wonder if she was trading away the pieces that made her whole. If soon there would be nothing left but hollow skin carrying the weight of stolen dreams. One night, as Laila made her way through the winding alleys of the bazaar, she noticed a man sitting near the shadow of the dream merchant's stall. His clothes were torn, his shoulders bent, and his eyes hollow, as if sleep had long abandoned him. He watched her with a strange recognition, as though he knew where she had been when she drew closer. He reached out with trembling hands and begged her to listen. His voice was cracked and rough. He told her that he too had once traded with the merchant, eager and hungry for lives beyond his own. At first, the dreams were sweet, filled with riches and love, but the prices grew heavier, until piece by piece he lost everything that tethered him to who he was. He confessed that he no longer remembered the name of his own mother, the sound of rain in his childhood home, the face of the woman he once loved. Each trade had stolen something deeper, and though the dreams gave him visions of greatness, when he awoke, he was emptier than before. Now he no longer knew which version of himself was real, whether he was the man who once lived in this city, or the countless selves he had wandered through in sleep. His empty eyes fixed on hers, and he whispered that the merchant does not only take memories, he takes the futures that might have been. He carves away the paths that could have grown, leaving only fragments of what could never be whole again. Fear coiled in Layla's chest as his words sank deep. She pulled back from him, yet his broken gaze followed, and for the first time she wondered if she too was stepping toward a fate where her own self would blur until nothing remained but a shadow longing for lives that were never hers. Layla's nights no longer belonged to rest. They had become doorways, each vile opening to another world where she was someone entirely different. In one dream, she sat on a golden throne, her crown heavy with power, her voice law to the fearful crowds who bowed before her. Yet her heart was hard and cold. In another, she wore the robes of a healer, her hands glowing with mercy as she saved the sick and wounded. But her own life was empty of joy, her sacrifices endless. And in yet another, she wandered endless halls of a vast library, a lonely scholar drowning in knowledge, yet starved of human warmth. Each morning she awoke with fragments of these selves clinging to her. Her heart carried pride, sorrow, and loneliness all at once. Her hands shook as if they remembered touching lives she had never truly touched. Her mind swirled with wisdom she had spoken in places that did not exist. She began to see reflections of those dream selves in her waking hours, a sharpness in her tone that reminded her of the ruler, a quiet ache in her chest that belonged to the healer, a hunger for silence that echoed the scholar. When she walked through the market, the faces of strangers blurred. Sometimes she thought she saw courtiers from the throne room, or patients from the healer's chambers, or fellow scholars from the endless library, reality and dream tangled, until she could no longer pull them apart. A alone in her chamber at night, staring into the shadows. She whispered to herself the question that haunted her. Was she Laila the scribe, or was she now a patchwork of 1,000 possible selves stitched together? And if she kept trading, how long until she no longer knew who she truly was at all? Laila could no longer carry the weight of her questions. The fragments of her many selves pressed too heavily on her chest. And so one night she strode straight to the stall, cloaked in shadows, her hands clenched, her heart pounding with defiance and fear. The dream merchant sat, as always, unmoving, his eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light, as though he had been waiting only for her. Her voice cracked as she demanded the truth, who he truly was, why the dreams bled into her life, why the cost grew sharper each time. She told him she could no longer bear the emptiness clawing at her, the missing pieces that left her hollow, even as her nights overflowed with stolen glories. The merchant only studied her in silence, until the stillness stretched so long she feared he would never answer. At last he lifted his head, and his cloak shifted. The shadows seemed to peel back, revealing lines in his face that made Laila stumble backward. The curve of his mouth, the scar near his brow, even the way his hands rested, all of it was achingly familiar, for she realized she was staring into her own face, older, wearier, carved with decades of sorrow. He told her he was not a stranger, he was her, the future that had once chosen wrongly. He had chased dreams until nothing remained of his true self. He had traded memory after memory, future after future, until he was left only as the hollow keeper of other people's mito-bins, enslaved to the very vials he once craved. He said he had waited for her at this crossroads, to warn her, to shape her path differently, yet his voice was not kind. It trembled with desperation, for though he wished to save her, he also longed to steal her chance and live again through her choices. The air in the bazaar grew heavier as the dream merchant placed a single vial before Laila. Unlike the others, it glowed with a brilliance so fierce it seemed alive, shifting. With golden fire and deep shadows, his voice was low and unsteady as he told her this would be the last trade, the one that would bind her forever. He said the vial held the dream of eternal greatness, a life where she would be remembered for centuries, where her name would be carved into stone and sung in songs, where power and wisdom would make her untouchable. But within that greatness, there would be no love, no warmth, no hand to hold in loneliness. Her path would be lit by fire, but cold as ice. Then he lifted another vial, smaller, faintly glowing with the gentlest of lights. Inside, it shimmered something softer, he said. It held the dream of a modest life, a life where her name might never be known beyond her family and a few friends, but it would be filled with connection, with the laughter of children, the comfort of belonging, the peace of nights spent beside those she loved. In that dream there would be no crown, no glory, yet there would be warmth that no shadow could steal. Laila's chest tightened, for both choices glimmered with promise, and both carried loss. She thought of the ruler she had once been in her dream, feared and obeyed, but desperately alone. She thought of the healer who saved lives, but wept in secret. She thought of herself, the scribe who had already traded too much. The merchant's eyes bore into hers, desperate, pleading. He told her she could choose either, and her path would be sealed. She trembled as she reached forward, knowing this was the hardest choice she would ever make. For whatever she chose, she would lose something she could never regain. Layla's hand hovered between the two vials, the fire of eternal greatness pulsing with the promise of glory, the gentle glow of the modest life whispering of warmth and belonging. Her chest felt torn in two, her mind screamed of power and memory, yet her heart ached for something quieter, something real. She closed her eyes and remembered the laughter she had already lost, the lullaby stolen from her childhood, the sweetness of honey cakes she could never taste again. She thought of the man who had warned her, his eyes hollow and broken, and she understood at last that the path of endless dreaming was not life but a slow unraveling. It was hunger that could never be fed. Her fingers curled around the smaller vial, the one with the soft light, and in that moment the bazaar fell silent. The glowing stalls dimmed, the air stilled, the dream merchant froze, his eyes wide with something between anger and sorrow. The shadows around him flickered, and then his form began to dissolve, his cloak of midnight unraveling like smoke in the wind. She reached out but touched only air, and his voice, cracked with centuries of regret, whispered that he had been nothing more than the echo of a road she chose not to walk, a shadow of the greatness she had refused. Then even that whisper faded, leaving her alone beneath the lanterns that now glowed faintly in the thinning night. When Layla opened her eyes again, she was in her own chamber, the first light of dawn spilling across her floor, her chest lighter, her mind clear. The hunger for other lives had vanished. She no longer longed for the might-have-beens. She breathed deeply and felt peace, for at last she knew she was ready to live her one true life with purpose and with grace.